This is it. The absolute point of no return. Yeah. I got some of this stuff just kind of primed up while I'm waiting on some. I'm actually going to use the Steel It paint to paint on this. But I got it primed. I was out of town for a couple days doing the final bash event, so I didn't want this to rust. Pretty much have all the glue out. What I'm going to do today, because I talked to my fab guy who's going to do like the tube rear and the fuel cell cage and the bash bars and stuff. He's going to be out here hopefully either this week or in the next couple weeks, so I need to get the back of this car ready. So this is the actual point of no return. This car could never go back to stock without spending a substantial amount of money. Right now I could still put everything back in it and, you know, whatever, it could still be a street car. But I'm about to take a body saw to this thing. We're going to cut it all the way underneath the factory, like seam glue deal clamshell type thing. And basically just leave the top part, taking inspiration from the Drift Games Corvette. I kind of like how theirs is. I'm not ready to do the whole matte field thing where I take this whole rear section off and do all that. I kind of like the way that the Drift Games one looks, so I'm going to try and use their method, see how it turns out. And we're basically just going to leave this thin strip all the way along the top to mount the fenders and bumper and whatever else, but the floor, all this stuff will be gone. All these tubs will be gone. So the theory would be that you have direct access to the frame rails and suspension from underneath or from on top of the car, as well as just a little bit of weight savings and easier like fuel cell placement and stuff like that. So we're gonna give that a go, set up all the GoPros and tripods and time lapse it, and we'll catch you guys when I get the whole clamshell off. Little progress video. I'm like 90% sure this is not how you're supposed to do this, but this is how I'm gonna do this because it's working out. I know I don't know how she would get this out without taking it out in sections or trying to cut the whole bottom piece out at one piece. So what I'm doing is I'm basically cutting it out in sections. Right here I've cut the fender liners out, and then I'll cut it back here and cut that piece out, and then I'll like work on getting the floor out because it's panel bonded to the frame in so many places. I don't think you could cut it. I tried to cut it all as one piece, but then there was no way to like cut it, cut across, and get the panel bond off, I guess. So basically just trying to cut out all that I can down to the floor. It's like I'll cut this back section out next, and then I'll cut the center section of the floor out, and then I'll basically just have these two little strips that I'll have to work with. So the car is in a significantly different state than the last clip for the chassis prep portion of this build series. I had some things change last minute, so I'm actually not doing the majority of the fab work in-house anymore. It's being split up between Bell Raceworks down in Vero Beach, Florida, who is taking care of my roll cage, and it'll be split up with Driftlab, who is here in Milton, Florida, part of Emerald Coast Motorsports. My buddy Hayden is going to be doing my tube rear. So the only thing I'm actually going to do in-house is the dry sump mounts and the fuel cell cage, which is what we're about to get to right now. But little update, I actually just got the car back. It's been like probably like 3 or 4 weeks honestly since I filmed that last clip, because I haven't had the car. It's been down south cleaning the roll cage. Started mocking up the body panels, which didn't even talk about in the last clip, but they ended up showing up. So here we are, roll cage is done. Massive thank you to Arthur Bell, Bell Raceworks, Vero Beach, Florida. He knocked this cage out for me in like 3 days. So basically we went down to the Freedom Factory to do some testing for 2022's layouts. I dropped the car off then. I got a call basically the following Monday saying the car was ready. So last Saturday I went down and picked it up, and here we are. So the roll cage is done. I opted to have NASCAR door bars built because I actually have aftermarket doors. So it'll have like Lexan, it won't have glass, won't have window motors. So I have NASCAR door bars done. The harness bar has been super recessed to basically try and accommodate as many drivers as possible with this car. The main goal with this car is obviously to be a rental car. At this point, the video is already out, so people will know. So we wanted to accommodate as many drivers as possible, and I think from what Arthur did his math on and said, anybody that's like 5'4" to 6'5" could drive this car and comfortably have room with the roll cage. So that'll be super cool. He also, let me run over here real quick. He also made me 3 pairs of seat brackets for this car. which are sitting over here on my parts shelf. So Bell Raceworks now offers, hold on, let me get all this stuff out of the way. I have some custom seat brackets now for this car as well, right there. So he used my car as a mock-up, but he now offers 3 different kinds of seat brackets. Obviously just one generic side, or one generic type for the passenger side. And then the driver's side, he has a short version and a tall version for basically drivers who are X amount of height and then drivers who are taller than that. So that's super cool. It recesses my seat way further back. So one pair of seat rails, the seat stops, I don't know, somewhere in here, and the other one, the seat basically goes all the way back to the wall. So that's kind of cool. But for the main purpose of this clip, the fuel cell cage. Alright, fuel cell cage done. I went to Lowe's Racing, as Ernest would call it today, and got some more square steel and some 1/8 flat bar, which I'm not even using yet. But the fuel cell cage is done. Ignore these. These are off the old car. I just didn't feel like making new cross supports for it yet. But I actually managed to get the fitment good enough and get the fuel cell where I wanted it, and I'm actually able to weld it directly to the cage. So right now it's just tacked in place, but I'll run a bead down here and a bead down here and weld it directly to the cage, and then we'll make one support somewhere off here to the chassis, just so in the event it ever got used in prospect, they can't say it's not welded to the chassis. According to their rule book, you have to have the fuel cell structure welded to the main chassis of the car, and I'm not sure whether they consider the roll cage part of the chassis even though it's welded to it or not. So we're going to cover both just in case. But yeah, fuel cell cage is done. I'll throw the fuel cell in it real quick, get a quick shot of that, and then the next step will be checking out the tube rear, which the car's... This is it. Fuel cell cage is finished, just minus some paint and some new bolts and a couple things. It's not permanently welded back in, but I thought I'd show you guys kind of how I did it and kind of where it's located in the chassis. I basically was going to move it further back up against the rear bar to kind of take up the weight of where the stock fuel tanks would go, but I'm going to move it a little bit further back and just kind of see how the car reacts, and then I can always shift the nitrous bottles and the fire suppression or just add some weights there if I need to. The batteries are also going to go where the stock fuel tanks are, and so the weight in the back should basically be roughly the same as what it is from stock. But the advantage I get with moving it up against the roll cage like this is I can weld it directly to the cage. I don't have to build stands, I have to build supports. It still comes in and out really easily. It makes pretty much placing everything else in the rear of the car significantly easier. And it leaves me a lot of room in here. So here is where I'm going to cut the frame off when I get to Driftlab tomorrow. We're going to cut the frame off and do like a tube rear structure. But it leaves me a lot of room to still do a rear mount. And initially I was going to move the fuel cell further back against the cage because I didn't think I was going to have room to put a big radiator in the back if I wanted to. But I grabbed a spare radiator we had laying around, and turns out I have 8 to 9 inches more than I thought I initially had in the rear of the car. So still plenty of room to expand midway through the year or going into next season if I decide to rear mount it, which is a goal of mine. I just don't have the time or the budget left to do it currently, and I don't really think it's needed for the rental program. I don't think I'm gonna have an overheating problem. So that's basically it. We're gonna get the car loaded in the trailer, head off to Driftlab and Emerald Coast Motorsports tomorrow to get the tuber structure done. So, well, things have changed dramatically since that last clip, as usual with a build like this in such a short time frame. I actually just got the car back from Driftlab. My buddy Hayden did the tube rear on this car. We didn't do a full tube front because it's a Corvette and it's kind of hard to do that, but we did do a front bash bar like this right here. And I actually really like this design. Neither him or I are a big fan of V-shaped bash bars. My car is going to go about 7 inches closer to the ground, so this will do a really good job of stopping stuff from going up under my car. It makes mounting the bumper and the coolers, if I ever decide to put bigger front oil or power steering coolers on this car, makes it significantly easier to mount the coolers. And since the last time you guys have seen it, I also got the tube rear done, same thing by Driftlab, my buddy Hayden. And this I love for so many reasons. One, the jack point, great location. It fits perfectly with the bumper. I can get the jack right up under it. Just clears the bumper, get the car up in the air. Bash bars, completely removable. Jack point, bolt in case it gets bent. Brace in the frame because we cut the frame off. The whole rear tube section bolts on. And he did bend me spares of bash bars and jack point, so I have spares of all of it in case something happens at an event, which is super convenient, super quick, make it super easy to maintenance the car. I just can't, like, I love the tuber on the Vette. I don't know why more people haven't done it. I'm assuming it's because people spend a lot of money on these cars and they just make them drift, like, you know, just drift capable street cars, but like, not my goal for this car. I want this car to be easily serviceable, easily maintenanceable, and be able to take a hit. So fuel cell cage is now permanently welded in as well. I mounted the fire suppression bottles and be mounted right there, and the firewall will just clear the suppression bottle. And that's pretty much gonna wrap up chassis prep. The only two things I've got left, well, one thing is I actually finished the battery mounts. The battery mounts, which are pretty kind of hard to see from here, but they're actually gonna be down in this hole. I'll put the car up here in a second to show you. I put the batteries in the location of the stock fuel tanks just to kind of keep the weight balance of the car. And then my dry sump tank is my last mount to make. All my dry sump stuff from Aviade is here. My pan, my pump. It's beautiful aluminum oil tank, which conveniently fit perfectly right here in the fender. So we're gonna get that mounted up and get the battery stuff finished up. We'll show you a clip of that, but that's gonna wrap up chassis prep. The next video, you will see us getting ready to paint it and mount the body panels. And then after that, it'll basically be driveline in, plumbing, wiring, hopefully go testing.